My name is Adrian Vale, and at 9:14 on a Monday morning, a man half my age tried to throw me out of the company I built. Not metaphorically, literally. "Security will escort you downstairs," he said, tapping a silver pen against the conference table like he was auditioning to play CEO in a low-budget Netflix drama. No handshake, no explanation, no respect. Just arrogance wrapped in a tailored Navy suit. The funny part? It was his first day as Chief Operations Director. Mine was year 22. I looked past him toward the glass wall overlooking downtown Chicago. Rain crawled down the windows in crooked lines, turning the skyline blurry and gray. Fitting, because the company I sacrificed my life for had become exactly that. Blurry, distorted, full of people who inherited power instead of earning it. The man sitting across from me was Landon Mercer, son-in-law of the founder. MBA from some elite business school, perfect teeth, expensive watch, the kind of guy who says optics more than results, and apparently the kind of idiot who thought titles mattered more than ownership. "I'm sorry," the HR girl beside him whispered nervously. "This decision came directly from executive leadership." Executive leadership. I almost smiled, because executive leadership technically worked for me. I stood slowly, buttoned my charcoal coat, and slid my company badge onto the table. Landon leaned back in his chair like he'd just conquered Rome. "You should have adapted," he said smugly. "This company needs modern leadership." That line almost made me laugh. Modern leadership. I had spent 2 decades keeping this company alive through lawsuits, market crashes, investor panic, federal audits, and one CFO who nearly gambled away $8 million on a crypto scam. But sure, tell me about leadership, kid. I picked up my leather folder and paused at the door. Then I said the sentence that changed the atmosphere in the room instantly. "You might want to cancel the board meeting this afternoon." Landon frowned. "Why?" "Because after today," I said calmly, "you won't be sitting at that table." And then I walked out. Most people think power looks loud. Corner office, luxury car, big speeches. Real power is quieter than that. Real power lives in contracts nobody reads. See, while the Mercer family spent years putting their names on magazine covers and business podcasts, I was doing something far more important. I was collecting ownership. Tiny percentages at first. 0.5% here, 1% there. Every time the company hit a crisis, I accepted equity instead of bonuses. The founder, Richard Mercer, thought I was loyal. Truth was, I was patient. Back when the company started, it was just Richard, a rented warehouse, and a dream too ambitious to survive on its own. He was brilliant at selling visions, terrible at building systems. That was my job. I built compliance, operations, investor protections, expansion structures. I made the company legitimate. And every time I cleaned up another disaster, Richard paid me in shares. By year 10, I owned 34%. By year 15, 51%. And after saving the company from a private legal settlement that would have destroyed the Mercer family name forever, I quietly became the majority shareholder. 68%. Nobody talked about it publicly because I never cared about attention. Attention makes people emotional. Ownership makes people dangerous. And hidden inside the shareholder agreement was a clause I personally wrote after Richard's nephew once tried firing 3 senior executives during a cocaine-fueled meltdown in Miami. Clause 11A, a corporate kill switch. It stated, any executive termination initiated by a non-equity appointee without formal board authorization would trigger immediate suspension of all temporary executive powers pending majority shareholder review. Most people ignored it, because most people never think they'll need the parachute until the plane catches fire. Landon signed my termination anyway, which meant by 9:16 a.m. the clause activated automatically, and by 9:17 every board member in the company received an emergency legal notice with my signature on it. I spent the next few hours at a quiet coffee shop across the river, not panicking, not angry, just waiting, because revenge is strongest when the other person still thinks they've won. At exactly 11:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. Richard Mercer. I let it ring twice before answering. "Adrian," his voice sounded strained, "we need to talk." "You should probably read page 14 first," I replied, calmly. Silence. Then, Jesus Christ. He'd finally found the clause. I could practically hear the blood draining from his face through the phone. "Landon didn't know," Richard muttered. "That's the problem. He acted anyway." "You're really doing this?" I stared out at the rain-soaked street. "No, Richard," I said quietly. "He did this." And I hung up. By the time I returned to headquarters, the building felt different. You can sense fear in corporate offices. It spreads quietly. People stop talking in elevators. Assistants avoid eye contact. Conference room doors close softer. When I stepped into the lobby, the receptionist nearly stood up too quickly. "Mr. Vale? Boardroom?" I asked. 22nd floor. I nodded once. No one stopped me, because legally, they couldn't. The boardroom doors opened the moment I arrived. Every seat was filled. Lawyers, investors, executives. And at the far end of the table sat Landon, still trying to look confident. Poor guy. He looked like someone who had just realized the swimming pool was actually the ocean. Richard Mercer sat beside him, exhausted and pale. I walked to the head of the table without saying a word. Nobody objected, because everyone in that room had already seen the documents, the ownership records, the filings, the shareholder registry. They all knew now. I wasn't an employee. I was the company. I placed my folder down carefully. Then I looked directly at Landon. "You fired me before finishing your onboarding paperwork," I said. A few people lowered their eyes to hide smiles. Landon cleared his throat. "This is clearly a misunderstanding." "No," I replied. "A misunderstanding is ordering the wrong lunch." I opened the folder. "This is corporate negligence." The general counsel adjusted his glasses nervously. "Clause 11A was properly triggered at 9:16 a.m., he confirmed. "All executive authority granted to Mr. Mercer has been suspended pending shareholder review." Landon blinked hard. "Suspended?" he repeated. "Effective immediately," the lawyer said. The room went dead silent. Landon turned toward Richard. "You said I had authority." Richard looked destroyed. "I thought I did," he whispered. That line hit harder than shouting ever could, because for the first time in his life, Richard Mercer realized the company no longer belonged to his family. It belonged to the man they treated like staff, me. I tried one last time to save himself. "This is personal," he snapped at me. "You're humiliating me because your ego got bruised." I stared at him for a long moment. Then I leaned forward slightly. "Do you know the difference between me and you?" He said nothing. "I survived consequences," I said softly. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the air felt heavy. I slid another document across the table. "This is my proposal." Richard picked it up slowly. "Buyout terms. 2 options. Option 1, I sell my shares at a premium and walk away permanently. Option 2, I stay, and everyone responsible for this disaster gets removed. Every fake title, every nepotism appointment, every executive who confused privilege with competence, gone."
Richard's hands trembled slightly as he read. Landon looked furious now. "You can't erase me from my own family company." I finally looked directly into his eyes. "No," I said calmly. "You erased yourself the moment you mistook power for permission."
The meeting lasted another hour. Mostly legal discussion, voting procedures, emergency restructuring. But emotionally, the outcome had already happened. Landon never recovered after that day. By the next morning, his access card stopped working. His company email was disabled. His office reassigned. No dramatic screaming, no viral meltdown. Just consequences. Quiet ones, the kind that hurt longer. Richard resigned 3 days later, officially for health reasons, unofficially because he finally understood something men like him hate admitting. A company can survive without a founder, but it cannot survive without the person who actually built its foundation. A week later, I stood alone in the executive office everyone thought belonged to the Mercer family. The city lights shimmered outside the windows, calm, cold, endless. The IT director walked in holding a new access badge, black card, gold chip. "Full administrative control restored," he said with a grin. I took the badge. "Thanks, Marcus." He hesitated near the door. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Did you know this would happen someday?" I looked down at the skyline below, then smiled faintly. "I didn't know who would betray me," I said, "but I always knew someone eventually would." He nodded slowly and left. I stood there alone for another minute before slipping the badge into my pocket. Funny thing about revenge. People think it's about destroying someone. It's not. Real revenge is making them realize they destroyed themselves. And that's exactly what Landon Mercer did the moment he walked into my office and forgot the oldest rule in business. Never fire the man who owns the building.
And that, my friends, is the difference between having a title and having power. Because titles can be printed overnight. Power is built over years. Landon thought the corner office made him untouchable. But confidence without wisdom is just arrogance wearing a suit. And honestly, the most satisfying part wasn't watching him lose the office. It was watching him realize, too late, that the man he disrespected was the one holding the entire company together the whole time. So, if there's one thing to take from this story, let it be this. Never underestimate the quiet person in the room. The one who doesn't brag, the one who doesn't fight for attention. Because sometimes the calmest person at the table is the one who owns it. And trust me, nothing is colder than being thrown out of a building you thought belonged to you, only to discover your name was never really on it in the first place. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments, what was your favorite revenge moment in this story? And remember, respect the people who built the foundation, because one bad decision can make the entire empire collapse overnight.